Let's talk about two teams that have made very good decisions lately when it comes to coaching hires, or over the last 2 years at least. Bo Henriksen and Sebastian Hoeneß boast the best points per game average of any coach in the respective club histories of Mainz and Stuttgart. Bo Henriksen at 1.7 points per game average. Sebastian Hoeneß is at 2 points. I wrote about Mainz last week and the excellent season they've been playing. And of course, as it's usually the case, when I do something like that, they lose their next match. I cursed them badly. Having said that, they're still sixth with 28 points, sitting just 3 points behind Leipzig. They're playing a Stuttgart side that are fourth. Won their Champions League game midweek. We haven't really talked about that against Slovan Bratislava. Jamie leveling with 2 goals. He's back, and I think that's a huge factor with leveling him back. That gives Stuttgart a significant weapon. Stuttgart can now advance in the Champions League, and I think we will have to talk about this when we get closer to it, Stefan, or possibly afterwards. A 1-1 draw will see both PSG and Stuttgart advance to the next round. Book it. That's going to be the result next week. But, let's talk about this match. I think this is going to be a fantastic fixture. 2 excellent head coaches with 2 teams that have played, Stuttgart, such a poor start to the season, right? But really resurgent lately. They're now in fourth, and they're looking really good forward too. This is going to be, I think, other than the game that we're talking about last, the Leverkusen-Leipzig game, the game of the weekend. And I think it is rightfully so the top spiel this week as well.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm wrong about that. It's not the top spiel, but it should be the top spiel.
It's the top spiel in your heart. That's the most important thing. I think it's going to be an interesting game. My money, if I'm being honest, is probably on Stuttgart in this game for a few reasons. Mainz have been outstanding, but their form has been almost exclusively in away games. So just to kind of put it into perspective, their away form is the 6th best in the division, and their home form is the 10th best in the division. Which might seem a bit bizarre because they've lost back-to-back away games. Obviously, that Berlin game, which we just talked about, but they lost 2-1 to Baumgart's side. I would say if this fixture was reversed, I would maybe be kind of leaning more towards Mainz, but there's just a lot going on in Stuttgart, which I think is really, really impressive. You mentioned Jamie leveling, but a lot of other players are returning. Dennis Undav is back. I've been kind of quietly impressed with Chris Fulrich as well, to be honest with you. I thought he had a quiet start to the season, but he's looked kind of back to his best very recently. And it just kind of feels like Stuttgart are just kind of kicking into gear. They're just kind of stepping up a level. They obviously had a very tricky start to the season with so many injuries and so many players being sold. But they've just kind of gone on from strength to strength. I watched their game against Leipzig a few weeks ago, and I was really, really impressed with them. Obviously, Leipzig go a goal ahead through Sesko. Xavi Simons comes in, cool as you like, plays Sesko through. Admittedly, Sesko's goal kind of went right through the hands of the Leipzig Stuttgart goalkeeper Alexander Nubel, which is a bit disappointing. But from there on in, Stuttgart just completely dominated the match, and they clearly had the better team. They had the better coach team. They knew what they were doing. And the thing I really like about the Stuttgart team is they've just got so many options that they can pick from. That front line, you've got Undav, you've got Toure, you've got Demirovic, Voltemata, Silas, although Silas is obviously away, Jamie Leveling, Brun Larsen, who also came on in that game and got a goal. There's just so many options there. And before we started recording, actually, I did a bit of digging into Voltemata, who's obviously doing, extremely well. Didn't play midweek because he's ineligible for the Champions League, but he scored in back-to-back games against Leipzig and Freiburg. And he's picked up 5, maybe 6 goals, I think, in his last 8 league games for Stuttgart, and an assist as well. And it's just fascinating because he obviously got picked up for free from Werder Bremen. They figured, he was a busted flush, so they let him go quite happily. And the really interesting thing is that I was reading an interview with him from back in December, and he mentioned that what he puts his kind of impressive form down to at Stuttgart is that they signed him they sat him down and said, here's everything you did wrong at Werder Bremen last year. And they showed him clips of him basically not making the right runs. They said, you're supposed to be running into this space, you're supposed to be running into that space, you're supposed to be attacking that area. And after reading that, I then went and looked up his stats, and sure enough, that you can see the clear, you can see what he was doing right last season, but what he was doing wrong. So, for example, if you kind of look at his passes received in each game last season, they're more or less identical. He was at 72 percentile this season. He was in the 74 percentile last season. But then when you look at his XG and his non-penalty goals, he's gone from being in the 6th percentile, or the bottom 6% for XG last season, to being in the top 92 percentile this season. So, the point I'm making here, long story short, is that his XG has gone through the roof because he knows where to be in the pitch now. He knows what runs to make. He knows where he's supposed to be. He's obviously finishing those chances as well, which is why he's also got a really healthy goal-scoring record. And he's added, his passes to the box, for example, so passes that he's making to other players, which is often an underrated aspect of his game as well. He had that last season at Werder Bremen. He did very well with that. And he was getting the passes from Werder Bremen players, but he was just in the wrong places. So I think that's just a perfect example of what Stuttgart seem to do so well, where they pick up these guys. Not all of them are stars of the future. Not all of them are kind of bona fide, wonder kids, or wunderkind, as you would say, Manuel. Some of these guys are just young players that other clubs have overlooked. And I think Woltemade is a perfect example of how Stuttgart are just so good at picking up these guys and saying, there's a lot of talent in there. You just haven't been coached correctly. And that's the key thing, I think, for the Stuttgart team. It's not just Sebastian Hoeneß, it's obviously the backroom staff that he has, because it's not Hoeneß sitting down with him in front of the TV and saying, watch these clips. It's obviously the backroom staff who know what they're talking about. And yeah, I think he's obviously been one of the kind of stars of the season. He's been one of the kind of, I don't know how you would describe an American sportsman. It would be like rookie of the year, maybe something like that, perhaps.
Like comeback player of the year, I would say.
Yeah, because
he was technically a rookie last year for Werder, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's 22 now. He's still quite young, but not senior, not his debut season by any means. So yeah, I've just been really impressed with him. I think he embodies what Stuttgart do so well.
No, he's such an interesting profile of a player, and I think what I think is the most fascinating aspect about him is that he almost plays like a playmaker, right? There's good news too that if Stuttgart qualify for the next round of the Champions League, he's actually eligible to play for them, because then he meets that criteria of being German trained. Right. Like he just missed it. I think him and one other player missed the deadline by like couple days to be registered for Champions League. Champions League, UEFA has these criteria, and it was really hard because they wanted him. Henriksen is the other one. Henriksen and Woltemade just missed the criteria to be registered, so they can be registered for the next stage. And of course, I think they will if they get through, which I think the chances are actually pretty decent. A, because I don't think PSG have been that great in the Champions League, and B, both teams, I think if it comes towards the 80, 90 minutes and it's a draw, they will probably be happily sit on that. And so he might get his registration. To stick with American sports and the kind of player that he is, I think there's a really interesting comparison in the NHL. Tage Thompson, really tall center player. So if you're in the NHL, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, I'm sorry, you will have to look him up. Very uncharacteristic, very tall as well. He's over 2 meters. And usually those kind of profile players don't play like that. And when I see Nick Woltemade play, he kind of always reminds me, because like Tage Thompson, he's more of a playmaker rather than a striker. And because he has that really weird reach, but he has this ability to really see players around him and find space. And he's actually really good, despite his very lengthy stature, to move really well between the space as well. So I think he's a really fascinating player, and it's really, Stuttgart have done so well finding these guys and making them better. It's almost like, okay, they're like, okay, this is the sort of player that we need to improve ourselves. We know we won't be able to sign a ready-made product, but we can maybe go to Werder Bremen, where he has done decent enough, but, didn't think he was being developed the right way. So he opted to leave on a free transfer. Stuttgart sit him down and say, like, here's as you pointed out, these are the characteristics that we think you can bring to us. He joins, and then the backroom staff around Sebastian Hoeneß, and this is Hoeneß's staff, right? Gets to work and gets the best out of player. And I mean, we can point to him. There's a countless other players in the Stuttgart side that they have done this with. Whether it's Leveling, Führig, Dennis Undav is another. They look for a certain profile of a player, they bring them in, and then they make sure that this player actually works in the system that they're playing. And that makes them better than some of the other clubs. I mean, one of the other teams that do this is Frankfurt, right? That's why these teams are being ahead of teams like Borussia Dortmund, who basically say, like, oh, this guy had a good year in the Bundesliga, let's bring him in because, he's just going to do this for us too. There's a plan here. And I think that's what you see with Nick Woltemade. There was a proper plan in place, and that's why Stuttgart have been excellent. That's why they've been able to compensate all these departures. And here we are, on match day 19, in a season when we all thought they're going to make a step backwards. They could very well qualify for the Champions League again.
Yeah, absolutely. The one player he actually reminds me a little bit of is a former Stuttgart striker in Sasa Kladzic. Lanky, but really underrated in terms of his build-up play, his dribbling, his getting, exploiting space, linking up other players, setting up goals and scoring goals. Obviously, unfortunately, Kladzic, his career has really come to a halt with a series of injuries. But before that, I thought he was going... maybe not right to the very top, but I thought he was going to be a really, really good player. He obviously moved to Wolves, and I thought if he could stay fit, he'd do really well in the Premier League. I think Woltemade could be exactly that as well. Another player I want to mention before we move on is actually Amin Al-Dakil, the centre-back, who Stuttgart signed from Burnley in the summer, who hasn't really had a chance to get going because he's also had a series of... he had a muscle injury, ruled him out for the first couple of weeks, and he was ill, and then he had a fever, I think, for... much of November, December. Well, not just a fever, obviously it's an illness. You don't have a fever for a month long, but he was out with an illness for the whole game. He's only really just got going in the last couple of weeks. He started both of Stuttgart's last two games. The 2-1 win over Leipzig, and the 4-0 win over Freiburg. And I think he could be a really interesting player to watch the second half of the season. That Stuttgart defence is a work in progress. They've obviously got a lot of young players in there. We've talked about a lot of them, and how it does kind of seem to be this kind of merry band of exciting young defenders, but none of them really doing terribly well. Chabot, Raul, a lot of guys in there who are, shall we to put it politely, are learning their trade on the go. And I think Al-Dakil is probably a step above all of them. So I expect him to play in this game, I think. I know he only played like 10 minutes in the Bratislava game. He came on in defensive mid. Maybe Stuttgart obviously just try not to push him too quickly. But if he starts in this game, he's definitely one to keep an eye on, because I think he's obviously an exciting young player, but he also plays in a position where Stuttgart desperately needs someone they can rely on. And I think it could be him going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. A few notes here for this game before we wrap it up and go to what is probably the top spiel. No Johnny Burkhardt for Mainz, so that's terrible news for them. Armando Sieb is expected to play up front. Stuttgart are going to rotate heavily because of that Champions League game next week, midweek. So Bruno, Wagnermann, and Undav are all expected to start off the bench, which I think is interesting. But, having no Johnny Burkhardt to defend against, I think is a changer, is a game changer. The Mainz brass did note that after the Union Berlin defeat, that without Johnny Burkhardt, this is just a different team, right? And Johnny Burkhardt is such a great player. The one issue that he has, he's so quick, and it seems like that he hasn't quite managed yet to attune his body to the speed that he's playing at. He's dealing with a lot of muscular injuries and that kind of thing. So I think that once he stabilizes his body, he could be a top-class striker, not just in the Bundesliga, but beyond that. But if he's not on the field, this Mainz team is just a step below. So I do think Stuttgart are going to have probably a major advantage in this game. But should be a really good one. I'm really looking forward to it.